Hey guys, how's it going? It is November 25th, 2018, and I was just over on Train Sim there replying to one of the interesting, more productive comments, I think. Basically about various things with Run 8, but I don't really want to talk about Run 8. I feel bad for even mentioning Run 8, to be honest, at this point. Um, because I want to make something very clear. I am a supporter of Run 8. I know it doesn't sound like it lately, and there was a few things that caught my attention by surprise yesterday. I wanted to make sure I was up to date with the latest news because we had just come back from my son and I coming back from a long weekend trip, as I mentioned yesterday. But there was some stuff that seemed like there was a joke or something comical going on, and I guess that was a little bit more of a reality. I want anybody, especially those that have given me so much enjoyment, whether I agree or don't agree or would do things differently. I want them to make money. I want them to succeed. I want them to grow. I just want to be clear on that, and hopefully that hasn't come across the wrong way. I think sometimes my intentions come across the wrong way, and I just want to understand that the criticism isn't because I'm a hater or it's because I want to see Run 8 fail. It's the exact opposite. I want to see them get bigger. I want to see them be able to do things, and unfortunately, it feels as time as if it's so cliquish. Actually, it doesn't feel time. It has been for a long time, probably years at this point. It's really ridiculous because it's like beating your head against a wall. But let me get that out of the way because I don't want to talk about Run 8 here. This isn't about Run 8. This is about RTS, and it's about my normal Sunday blog or whatever. First, let's deal with the whole Sunday thing again, as I usually do. Like I said, this is counseling for me, or therapy, or whatever the hell you want to call it. It gets me through a Sunday night, being able to open up and basically say what's on my mind or how I feel. First of all, my opinions as far as what's going on with train simulation or whatever. I'm not the only one feeling these things, but when I talk about Sunday, first of all, this is how I can relate or be able to talk to people. I actually got email responses yesterday, which was nice. But this is actually the toughest long weekend of the year. Long weekends are always tough for me to come back to, especially on the Sunday, and especially until I'm at least in the same house again of my son, because it gets very quiet in this place. With the dog, whether the dogs are barking, if they're not, if they are, whatever, that's not the point. The point is not having my son, especially the amount we talked this weekend. Holy smoke. You talk about conversations. We weren't just listening to music or watching YouTubes. There's times where we're just watching YouTubes and I'm thinking I'm wasting the entire weekend watching YouTube with him. I even went out for a walk today with him. We're feeding the rest of the birds. I got my freezer cleaned out finally. I got all the bread done. I didn't do any work as far as getting ready for the move or anything. It still looks a little bit messy in here, to my standards, I should say. But the truth of the matter is I am approximately 2 months away from a move, and I'm much further along than I thought I was going to be. So that's a good thing. And that's, hopefully that rate continues. I don't know what's going on. The next big holiday for me is going to be Christmas, and I get a week off, which is something I did not expect. And that will pretty much lead into, hopefully, some productive cleaning or getting rid of stuff or destroying stuff or whatever the hell I have to do to get the move to take place. And the worst case scenario is if I can't, things will start going in boxes, but I don't, hopefully it doesn't have to come to that. I'm pretty optimistic that I can get, hopefully, as much as I can situated and in a situation where I feel comfortable that I'm not throwing away too much or giving away too much, etc. But I still have work to do, so I'll keep at that. That's what's keeping me from doing the RTS work right now, besides procrastinating, which is always going to be something that follows me. But the good part is, and I told them it, I said, you keep on me. If you don't want to see me, it shouldn't be up to him, but this gives me added incentive, because I basically do not want to look like a failure in front of my son. So that gives me added incentive to make this happen. And he seems to be really interested that I succeed in this. And he wants to see me succeed. Obviously, I want to set an example. He's going to do things with or without my example at this point. And hopefully my examples of other things or other behaviors or other, at least the good parts of me have worn off on him. The exploratory nature that we have, being able to, like the trips and seek out exploring our world, I think rubs off on him, and that comes from me quite a bit. So definitely looking forward to that as things move on and see what happens in 2019. But yeah, it's just one of those things, and I don't even want to talk anymore about the long weekend. The biggest reason why this long weekend in particular is a tough one is because the next time I get into the outdoors or outside of my area or any kind of travel, unless I'm spending money and taking a bus or something, because I think this is going to be a long winter, and I think it's going to be, maybe a snowy one. Not necessarily good for travel or even getting away anywhere for any reasons, but other than a couple trips that I have planned and a few other, like he has a tournament in February. I think he has another one locally in January, but other than those karate tournaments and just deciding to splurge on some money and go to Toronto or something like that, the next time I'm going to have any type of real long weekend other than Christmas that I'm actually going to be able to get away is not going to probably happen until March. So this is the tough part, and that's just like, okay, here we are. We're at the end of November. I mean, you're 4 months away. So the good news about that is I don't spend as much money. The other good news about that is I have a lot of time on my hands. So even if I procrastinate, I'm bound to do something, I think. Other than the move, 2 of those months are going to be getting ready for it. Once I'm settled, hopefully by the time February comes along, I'll either have the groundwork laid out or we'll be already, or basically ready to go and start with the RTS dispatcher. Now, I wanted to clarify, and I saw the emails. There were some questions. Scott had some questions regarding it because I had mentioned freight yard manager and yard duty and all that other stuff. RTS dispatcher is going to be, and plus, when your son's here and he's all excited about it and, he wants to talk about things and he'll interrupt you or he'll, sometimes it'll get like into an argument because he's wanted to talk about things. When him and I are talking, we get along fine. But it's sometimes I don't know what it is about live streams, but I'm trying to present something and he just has to get his words in there. He's gotta be the presenter, and I'm like, look, let me get this out first, buddy. But no, we get along great. Honestly, we do. Um, it's just the way things are. Uh, with this whole live stream thing, he loves doing it too, and that's the goofy thing. And I always find him. It's like damn it. It's like, let me get my point across first. Then you can input, or I'll ask you, or talk. We can communicate or have a dialogue. But anyways, I don't know what I was saying about that. I felt bad. I feel bad about that because I don't want that, because that's not what we do. And we had lots of conversations this weekend. It was so cool. Even today, as we were walking out and feeding the birds or whatever. But yeah, RTS Dispatcher is going to be a replacement for Train Dispatcher 3. It's a much needed. It's not going to be just a board that I create. I could easily go the content route and create custom content or custom routes, or have others create content as well, or have payware or shareware, freeware, whatever. But the reality is, I want anybody to be able to create content. I think that's one thing, I mentioned Run 8, I guess that's one thing that's lacking right now, is that people really can't create as much content for Run 8. And that's a tough one, because Microsoft Train Simulator, of course, you could always create content for. It's just Microsoft Train Simulator or OpenRails just isn't as good, in my opinion. It's activity based. So RTS Dispatcher will be, as I said, it'll the first phase of it is just to replace Train Dispatcher 3 and allow people to do the content creation. It's not going to be compatible with Train Dispatcher 3. It's going to have its own system. I think I got into some of that yesterday. The other phase, that if that's successful, I'll want to have an AI dispatcher built into it. I think the second phase will still be an RTS dispatcher. What Run 8 does, and I mentioned that again, it may be dependent upon where I take it, because if Run 8 can get their act together and get things going, or if some other producer basically any train simulator that can get their act going in 2019, or by 2019, but I would say 2019, the way it's looking, then that might reflect what I want to do. But assuming that the status quo stays the same and the train simulation landscape stays the same, by the time RTS Dispatcher is around next year, and then the AI is developed for it, this will be taking, I don't know how long it's going to take. My son asked me how long it was going to take. I said, I don't know how long it's going to take. I says, we're going to have to work on it a little at a time. I says, honestly, from what I can see, it is not going to be a big project. I don't see it being, and this is the reason why I'm taking it on. I was originally going to go the route of doing just the RTS software. And some people get confused thinking because RTS with Run 8. RTS, and I mentioned a Run 8 in perspective, not to, like I said, I don't want to be dissing Run 8 here. That's not the point. Most people who are familiar with RTS is familiar with RTS because of Run 8, or vice versa. That's how the relationship goes with that. Run 8 was just a vehicle, and it's a damn good vehicle, but it's the 3D, it's basically the 3D train simulation side to allow me to use my car forwarding system and implement it into a program such as Run 8 that's able to handle it. But my goals for RTS go much further, and it always has. I want the ultimate system similar to a freight yard manager, which I consider to be the best railroad simulator. I've said this, and there's a distinction between what is the best railroad simulator and the best train simulator. The best train simulator allows you to do the physics, has the nice, graphics or whatever, and are good enough, or get you into feeling the most that it's like to be an engineer, or to be switching, or to be humping or whatever. Freight yard manager is more about managing the railroad and the car forwarding operations, and that's why I say freight yard manager is the best railroad simulator, because what it does is it allows you to have these vast networks that can connect with each other and be able to move traffic across a series of maps and yards, and it actually has multiplayer and allows, and a lot of this is multiplayer. One thing about multiplayer, though, I will say this. I know a lot of people probably think I'm huge in multiplayer. Multiplayer is a tool for me. It's not the be-all and end-all. If I can get AI to do it, I would probably go that route instead. And then if I can get multiplayer to work, great. But I find that multiplayer and community involvement and cliquish groups and all this other drama that's associated with multiplayer can be very destructive and take away from it. It actually, I find it has the ability, if you rely too heavily on it, it has the ability to segregate communities. I think I've seen that in Run 8. I think it's a strong example. There are segregated communities because of that. And a lot of people say, well, why can't we all get along? Well, that's because people want to do things different ways. I have my ways. Like, even people that do get along wants to do things differently. You take a look at Southwest Rails and how I want to do things. Hell, Scott and I get along great, but Scott has different ways that he wants to do things, that I want to do things. So you see the segregation gets involved. Now, yeah, Scott's willing to play on Southwest, or he's willing to do something with RTS, just like I'm willing to do something if it fits my needs on Southwest to a certain extent. Scott's, I have to have. It's more than just switching or car forwarding for me. It's not about that. That's just part of it. If it's detailed and whatever, running. The problem is, and I hate to use Run 8. I have to use Run 8 as an example because it's the standard bearer as far as I'm concerned. But the thing with Run 8 is you have three routes or three regions. And I had this I got a reply to this conversation because somebody had mentioned, well, you already have the ability to do a short line, which was SJVR. The problem with that is it's integrated into the Northern Transcon. So if you're integrated into the Northern Transcon, and that's a major Class 1 railroad that has all that traffic coming in and out, you can't really segregate it. And my point was SJVR, what happens is it goes into the yards at Bakersfield. So it's already crossing main lines, which means essentially to do it as prototypical as possible, you're actually dealing with a Class 1 railroad. And you have to operate that Class 1 railroad. Then you're looking at spawn points, all kinds of things. The closest thing that I ever came in Run 8, for example, was Florida and the Sanford sub. That was the closest thing I could come to it. Because I could do a spawn point in Jacksonville, I could do a spawn point in Taft, or something. Yeah, I think it was Taft. And I was able to run a fairly light traffic territory, dispatch it myself, But still, even that was too long for me. There was too many industries involved in it, and yeah, I could segregate certain things. But that's the problem. Say if Scott and I want to run. Well, if Scott and I want to run, I know Scott can run on himself, and he can say, "Well, I'm not worried about the traffic. I'm not worried about this." I do. I worry about those things because I'm thinking of the dispatching mind. I'm thinking of, well, if I'm running a train, shouldn't I be seeing other traffic since I'm on a double track main line, or since I'm on a dispatch territory? Should I just automatically appear and go out there? It doesn't make sense. And a lot of people will say, the good old days of RTS back in Run 8 version 1. Well, the only reason why they were the good old days was everything was new, and for me personally, I enjoyed having people have a service available to them. And if I was so lucky to get enough people that I could warrant a dispatch, then it would be great. Otherwise, it wasn't. It really. I never really liked running, and I can give you countless examples of where I just, even on my own server, I just did not want to run because it didn't feel realistic to me of running a train for 3-4 hours and not seeing another train. It didn't make sense, and just seeing all clear. So it's like the equivalent of running Microsoft Train Simulator in Explore mode. That's why when version 2 came out and AI came out, it was such a breath of fresh air, but at the same time, then you had to look at it as, well, okay, we got it now. Do we have enough people to run everything? And the answer to that is usually no. You never do, especially the bigger they get. Now, if the community was all together and wanted to do the same thing and everybody agreed, well then, yeah, you probably would have enough people. But because everything is based on local, and you're not on some big, huge network that Run 8 provides. See, if you were on some network and they managed it and they created the system and you had to run on their networks, so it was a massive multiplayer environment. A lot of games run that way, where they're on a massive multiplayer environment where you're on one server. Or you might have a few different ones, but usually you're on one server. So the only game in town is to be on that server. Those are the situations where you either take it or leave it. But those can be some of the interesting, because those are a sense of real community, because that is the community. You're either part of it or you're not. You either do multiplayer or you don't. So that's the way that goes. But anyways, I think I'm getting on a tangent here that I didn't mean to. So getting back to if RTS has its dispatcher and RTS has AI integrated dispatching, or at least assisted dispatching, that becomes the backbone. My next logical step would be to create the RTS software. Has nothing to do with Run 8, just the RTS software that is able to take a freight yard manager, yard duty like environment, which is a 2D map basically. It's not a 3D train simulator. All it does is allow anybody to take a train with somewhat realistic physics. It doesn't have to be perfect physics, but it shouldn't be like a model railroad, although it could be. Freight Yard Manager has like model railroad type controls, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhat similar to trains, if I recall. But the point isn't to have realistic physics. The point is to manage a yard and all that other stuff. And manage yards or humps or whatever else, or industry switching. So you're on a map, and keep in mind you still have the RTS dispatcher as the backbone, controlling all the traffic coming in and out. And it's communicating with the yard masters where it needs access to yards, or track authorities into yard limits, etc. So there's some communication system going through with the AI and the players. What ends up happening is you have this system that not only a player can use to do whatever job he wants, whether it be yardmaster, whether it be switching crew, hump crew, whatever work needs to be done, but it also has its own AI-driven system. So essentially, the whole thing can run by itself. Not only will the dispatching be able to run by itself, but so will the crews. And everything basically runs itself by a waybill generation system that uses both the dispatching software or modules as well as the RTS software, whether it be maps or system or network or whatever connected to various other ones, and it's able to run on itself. So if you could, I mean, foreseeably, this thing could run 24 hours a day. It may only run local traffic on like a smaller network. It may only run local traffic during, weekday hours, like 9 to 5 or something like that. And then during the night, the yard could be dead, kind of like a smaller yard. And then run the locals whenever it would normally do the locals, run the yard whenever it would normally do the yards. But as a user, you could decide whether or not you want to dispatch, you could decide whether or not you want to run said locals, you could either pause the clock or fast forward the clock. If you have AI, then you could potentially speed up time or speed up the clock so that the process would continue on its own to get to where the job you want to run. Now, if you're talking multiplayer, well, of course, speeding up a clock is not feasible. But multiplayer is the least of my concerns. It always has been. People don't realize that. They think, oh yeah, Sean's big on multiplayer. No, Sean don't care about multiplayer. Multiplayer is a tool. People power is a tool. And the reason why it's a tool is because AI is not available. Do I like having multiplayer in a train simulator? Absolutely. Do I like being able to have a community and a sense of a purpose and getting people together? Absolutely. But when there's not enough people and you're relying totally on multiplayer, you've defeated the purpose. Because now you don't have enough people to run at said time or said number of people to operate said number of positions. Suddenly, you're short of crews. Short of crews is a real life thing, but when you're short of crews too much, then it gets ridiculous. The entire system doesn't run. So crew shortages is okay. I like the idea of having, if I was to do a server like a Run 8 style server or something like that, I actually would love to do something that's smaller, but actually has crews that are more demand based on the availability of crews. So in other words, work might be available, but it gets done whenever crews are available to run it. That doesn't necessarily work too well with the dispatching systems. You could go so far as to have some type of, class 2 or lower level, smaller world, so that there's just so much work available and you either get that number of people available to do the work or you don't, and if you don't, well, then that work gets carried over to the next day or whatever. But I'm a big proponent of AI and having the crews be able to do their own work with or without people. And if people are there, well, that's great. They get to take over what normally would be done by the AI. Perhaps they do it better, more efficiently. But the point is they get to enjoy it. And they get to do what they want when they want, basically. To a certain extent. Multiplayer, Multiplayer actually takes away of the ability to get to do what you want and when you want. And that's something my son, you know, he's more interested in doing what he wants when he wants. Well, you know, most kids are. But that's why he's not interested in multiplayer as much. He is to a certain extent, but he wants to be able to have the opportunity at certain tasks that he enjoys when he wants to, not waiting for a session or waiting for, you know, he's not into planning or schedules or anything like that, or planning on a certain night that he's going to run and stuff like that. Now, you know, he misses the model railroad club, but he misses that for other reasons. I don't think it's about running certain jobs or something like that. But anyways, I just want to clarify all that, and that this was a good way for me to just get a few things clarified and off my chest, and to get through to the lulls of the typical end of a long weekend. So hope you guys in the stateside or wherever, if you enjoyed the long weekend like I did here in Canada, even though it's not technically a long weekend, but I did take 2 vacation days because, you know, the US was closed, so it allowed we do a lot of work with the US. So instead of twiddling my thumbs at work or catching up on things, I decided I always like taking vacation on the US holiday, and most US holidays actually. It's not the only one I take. But you know, we'll see what happens next year. I have to still schedule my vacation next year, but I'm waiting to see for a few things that it's going to happen. So, anyways, that's it for now. I think I'm gonna go do some other things, and hey, who knows? Maybe I'll get started. I doubt it very highly that I won't be starting this year, to be quite honest, until the new year at least. So, with the RTS stuff, but I just wanted to clear it up. That's what I have in mind. It's not too far off into the future, and you know, once things get going, I think both myself and my son are going to enjoy bringing that to you guys, and hopefully that's something to look forward to by spring. I'm really want to get it out by spring. That'd be great if I can, but I don't think it's that difficult. Honestly, I don't think it's going to be that difficult to do. This isn't rocket science. So just to get something to replace that alone, and to have the things that I've always wanted in this program for Train Dispatcher 3, I think that's going to be a big first step for me, and give me something to enjoy doing while I still develop the software and be able to do other things with it. So anyways, that's it for now, guys. I'll be on Monday, tomorrow. Looks like I'm gonna sign up to be dispatcher if it's available. Wednesday I will not be able to dispatch on Wednesday. I'm gonna make a note of that as well. But because I'll be with my son from 7 till 9, X has got some appointment or something, so I'm gonna have him on Wednesday. That's gonna be cool. So the only day I won't see him is Monday, so that's not too bad. And but I'll be on later on. I'll probably be back on at 9:30. So I might see what's available to run between 9:30 and 11. Hopefully I'll find something more intriguing that doesn't put me to sleep like the other day did. But that's it for now, guys. Have a good one. We'll talk to you.